The Association of Southeast Asian Nations is intensifying efforts to realize by 2015 the ASEAN Economic Community and implement the initiatives to achieve a single market and production base, allowing the free flow of goods, services, investments, and skilled labor, and the freer movement of capital across the region. If ASEAN were one economy, it would be the seventh largest in the world, with a combined gross domestic product of $2.4 trillion in 2013. It could be fourth largest by 2050 if growth trends continue. With over 600 million people, ASEAN's potential market is larger than the European Union or North America, next to the People's Republic of China and India. ASEAN has the world's third largest labor force that remains relatively young. To give us insights on this, we are honored to have again on the studio Attorney Antonio Abad, or Tony Abad. He's a panelist of the Dispute Settlement Panel of the World Trade Organization, a CEO and Managing Partner of the Trade Advisory Group, Director of the Ateneo Center for International Economic Law, and Professor at the Ateneo Manila University School of Law. He was also a tariff commissioner and was responsible for the determination of the overall tariff structure for the Philippines. He's also a noted expert of international trade law. Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus, sir.
Thank you. It's nice to be back.
Welcome back, sir. Okay, sir. So we are talking about the free trade.
Okay.
Sir, I want to go back to, we were talking earlier about the workforce, businesses
Yes.
that will be affected by the ASEAN economic integration, sir. Before I asked our ASEAN expert about this, I gave an example of Ford. During the latter part of President Arroyo's term, she was able to convince Mr. Ford to set up an assembly plant here in the Philippines. Then after 4 years, it closed down because of poor sales. Now, Ford assembly plant transferred to Thailand.
Yes.
Because it can achieve the economies of scale there because of a bigger car market. Now, would this scenario happen to our car assembly plants here come full effect of the ASEAN economic integration?
Yes. Well, let's focus first on this issue of the car assembly business. Before, the car companies would look at each ASEAN country as a separate market.
Okay.
So they gear everything, including even the import program and the assembly program, towards that market. Now, in an integrated market, it's like a single production base or single economy concept of the ASEAN Economic Community, these companies are now going to look at the whole market, the whole 600.
Okay.
And assuming that you're able to achieve the fluid movement of goods and investment and services within the region, then logically they are going to consolidate and rationalize their production so that you probably have only one or two major production bases servicing the whole market. And chances are they will go to those economies or those members of ASEAN that have a more developed sort of foundation for car assembly. Now, Thailand, their strategy early on was to gear towards the global market, the production and I guess really to focus on car parts. Now, because they focus on car parts, they became very good at the production of car parts, and that made car assembly gravitate towards Thailand. And admittedly, Thailand has a lower cost of doing business than the Philippines. So naturally, you will go to the countries with a lower cost of doing business.
Okay.
So as you have said, they transfer to another country because that is where they can achieve their targets.
That's right.
Having said that, sir, what are our strong points that we need to highlight in order to entice other manufacturers, foreign investors to invest in our country?
Well, when you look at the ASEAN community, it is going to become, the concept is a community, whereas before you have 10 countries competing with each other. Now we have to remember that when you become a community, now you're reorienting towards cooperation from competition. So it's now 10 countries that are supposed to cooperate with each other and discover our complementarities and strengths. Now, technically, it's hard to determine exactly where we will be good at the Philippines until you really open up the market. Then you establish your competitive edges. You determine where you're particularly strong. But of course, offhand, at this point, you look at us as a provider of services. And not just talking about cheap labor, but really about all kinds of services. No? So whether it's an outsourcing type of business or even the movement of people from the Philippines to help with the management of companies in other ASEAN countries, you'll see that happening. Then, because production processes nowadays are no longer concentrated in particular countries, but are now part of global, what they call global or regional value chains, you will see that the Philippines will become a part of a manufacturing chain.
Okay.
And it will probably be an area where there would be a lot of the, what they call the back office support.
Okay.
And we may also discover that we are good at the production of certain components of the production process. But it will no longer be like you set up a factory and it produces everything here. Now, you probably produce a part of that. And that's just about manufacturing. Now, the other strength is that it could become a hub for all kinds of other types of business activities. In other words, if you rationalize based on this regional model, now you will try to see where should I situate my hub for whatever it is in the business process, and probably the Philippines will find itself selected for some areas.
So it's like saying, Serna, instead of saying manufactured in this country, it will be assembled in this country, wherein the parts are coming from different countries.
Right.
Is that it?
That becomes made in ASEAN, basically, and maybe ASEAN together with other countries like China and India, discovering the complementarities. No? And that happens. In other words, the natural process is that when you have a bigger market or a bigger economy, you're trying to establish the most efficient way of doing things. So you'll make use of the region in its most efficient manner, now that you don't have barriers between the different countries. And ideally, if you go back to basic economics, okay, the competitive pricing model really is saying that if the world were integrated, then you would be producing what you are most efficient at. It is, both the theory of absolute advantage and comparative advantage, point you in that direction. But you can only establish your advantage when you know when you're part of this integrated market.
And I think, sir, that's one of the goal of the integration, to get the best practices of each country.
Yes. Right. So you discover efficiencies that were not there before, and countries will become more efficient in their own production process or their way of doing business. No? Not just the Philippines, but everyone else. No? Each one has its history of inefficiency, histories maybe that were also affected by the politics, by violence. And all of that now in a atmosphere of peace and cooperation, now will give you a better chance to establish those efficiencies.
Okay. Now, sir, comparing the EU to the ASEAN area, the integration, EU took 50 years to really integrate, right? Now that they are integrated, it is one block. The global economy is like in a recession, so the EU is also in a almost, but it didn't reach that, but it is almost in a recession. Now we are trying to establish a block. What will happen to us during a recession?
Recessions are part of, I think, global financial cycles. And also, sometimes they are an effect of a gap in regulatory measures that lead to certain practices in well-established financial centers that affect the rest.
Okay.
EU is affected by these financial cycles in the same way that the ASEAN countries individually are affected. Now, they most probably will also be affected, but I think we will be able to establish more resilience because of the size of the larger size of of the region.
Yes.
Plus, remember in the EU, recession hits different countries in a different way, but the reaction to
One country.
one country's negative, let's say, a negative impact on a particular country or maybe three countries, the EU as a group is
Helps.
able to react to it in a faster way. Whereas here right now, when we have economic crises or problems that affect the region, we still tend to react to it and help. Each one is on their own in trying to deal with the crisis. But as a cooperative community, now we will be addressing it as a region.
Okay.
And there will now be a stake for each country in the stability of the other countries. So it becomes, I guess, a self-fulfilling community of, we become dependent on each other. There's interdependence. Again, there's negatives and positives, but I think the positives will definitely outweigh the negatives.
Sir, lastly,
Yes.
what can you advise those sectors who have fears about ASEAN integration?
Okay, it's always the problem. Well, those who raise fears of ASEAN integration usually don't want things to change. But the Philippines has to change. Of all the countries in ASEAN, it is where there's the highest level of inequality. It is the only country where the human index, the quality of life is actually getting worse for the majority. Whereas all the ASEAN countries are actually improving. They may have come from a poorer base, like Cambodia, Vietnam, but they're all improving. I mean, everybody.
Yes.
Whereas here, there are only a few who are getting very, very rich, and everyone else is getting poorer. We hope that ASEAN will change that.
Okay.
And you have to, so it's not just those who complain, you have to think about those who will benefit. And, well, let me end by, or let me at least emphasize before we end that think about the consumers of the Philippines. Buying Filipino products is really, people don't really ask when they're making a purchase where a product is made.
Yes.
All they're doing is buying the best product, the best price, and quality. And that is what you want. You don't even have to look at a product. It's made in the Philippines, but it's a quality product.
Yeah.
And certainly as consumers, we deserve to have a choice. And all these years, we have not had choices because we were controlled by a few companies. Now, when you open to the ASEAN economic community, we, the consumers, will have choices coming from other countries. And eventually, the few who have controlled us will also change their behavior towards becoming better corporate citizens.
Okay.
There you go. And on that note, thank you very much, Attorney Abad, for gracing our show. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
so much, sir, for sharing so much today.
Kaya pa nga eh.
All right, we'll be back.